Hello, everybody. We're going to give people some time to kind of be trickling in here. So we're just going to wait just a second. But Chad, how are you today? How you
I'm
doing?
good, Austin. I am digging the t-shirt.
Right? Right. We got,
Love it.
I'm
Hey,
currently, you got one too.
I
I'm
do.
currently moving. And so I was like, well, I want to wear something for Christmas. And as people can tell, like everything's in boxes. Normally there's stuff on these shelves back here. But I have like 3 t-shirts that I keep in like one of my drawers rather than my closet. And they're like the t-shirts that I wear like once a year. And obviously this kitten riding a unicorn is one of those t-shirts. So this
Well,
is
I'm a
what
little
I
bit
pulled
off
out.
your spot. I'm more like the hippie van, dashing through the snow.
You know what? It works. It works. All right. We got some people coming in here. Alan, Barb, Bill, 2 Bills, Chase, Conrad, Joe, Lori, Michael, Myron, Nate, Sean, Steve, and Thomas. Thank you guys for joining in. If you're here, let us know. Throw your name in the chat. Tell people where you're from, just so that we can kind of get the conversation going. We'll kind of start things up in like 1 minute, just to give people some time here to join in.
So I'm curious, Austin, did you have to dig through boxes to get the Santa pick out behind you?
So I was lucky on that one too. So this is one of my favorite things. I have like a box over here of like artwork that won't fit in it's just a box of stuff. And we had put that one like right outside of it. So I walked down here and I was like, oh, Santa sign. I got to put that up. So that's how it is. Are you a Christmas guy, Chad? Like, do you love the
Oh yeah.
traditions?
So I may lose my man card here, but so every November 1, it's on. There's
Yeah.
Christmas music. I mean, we're putting the tree up. We are
Yes.
Christmas junkies.
That's
And
awesome.
we have our selected 7 Christmas movies we watch in a particular order
Yep.
every year. And yeah, we're horrible.
You're horrible. That's awesome. I'm the exact same way. So we're moving tomorrow. And I was like, well, since we're already moving and moving stuff around, I'm like, why don't we just go ahead and put up our tree like the day that we get into this house? My wife was not about that, but I would gladly put my tree up before Halloween. Just saying. But
Yeah. We're November 1 every year. Got there about, depending on what day it falls on, but
yeah,
typically the first week of November.
I love the spirit of Christmas, dude. It's so fun. Thomas from New Mexico. Hello. I
Hey,
believe.
Thomas.
Joe from Smithfield. We love Joe. It's good to have you here. Bill from Central Illinois, my country. Hello and Merry Christmas early. Bob, good to have you here from Kentucky. Chad, you're.
I know Bob. He's a friend of mine. He's a pastor,
Oh,
great guy. I also know Lori. I worked at their church in Chicago, outside of Chicago at Mackinac.
really?
Sure did a planning retreat. Lori's a great leader. It's good to see you, Lori. Glad you joined us today.
That's awesome. Alan from Albuquerque, welcome. Good to have you guys here. So, Chad, let's go ahead and get rolling because
Sure.
we have a lot of stuff to talk about.
We do.
And I'm sure that there'll be questions throughout and things just like random rabbit trails that we go on. So I'm going to kind of introduce this conversation and then we'll jump in here. So, welcome to everybody who's joining in. And thank you for being part of this conversation. About Christmas. I know that it might feel a little bit early, but Christmas is going to be here before we know it. And this year has already been crazy enough. And so it's going to look a little bit different this year. And so starting the conversation maybe a little bit earlier than you have in the past is going to be really important for it to be effective this year. If you don't know me, my name's Austin Savage. I am the managing director here at 95 Network. And if you're not familiar with 95 Network, we exist solely to support small and mid-sized churches. We do that kind of our big buckets. We do that through things called content, conferences, coaching, and consulting. And so we won't dive deep into that, but that's just a little bit about what we do. And today I have my good friend and the newest addition to our team, Chad Hunt. And so for the people who don't know you, who are tuning in today, Chad, why don't you give just a brief introduction of your experience and kind of what you do for 95 Network, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, so as Austin said, my name's Chad. It's good. Some of you I know, a few of you. So some of you know me from the Unstuck group because I've worked with your church.
Yes.
or I am working with your church. So I still am currently with the Unstuck group with Tony Morgan and the Unstuck team. So I do consulting with them as well. With COVID-19, that's kind of slowed things down for some of us on Unstuck, has given me the awesome opportunity to join 95 Network. And my wheelhouse has always been small churches. I led a small church. I've worked with lots of small churches around the country. And so kind of my backstory, I'm a PK, pastor's kid, and led a church in a rural place called Cave City, Kentucky. It grew to a decent size that granted me some other opportunities. And kind of the weird thing with me is even back then, coaching and consulting was always my main vein.
Yeah.
I wrote a recovery program years and years ago. And I remember Melissa and I, making the transparencies for the overhead projectors and going from church to church and training pastors on how to do this. So it's always
That's awesome.
been a gear for me is to help and to equip churches. For me, the thing I love more than standing on a stage is a Sharpie in my hand with a flip chart behind me, seeing leaders capture a vision and impact people with the gospel of Jesus.
Dude, there's something special about it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love that's your passion. So I'm really excited to have Chad here with me today. He's going to be kind of the one giving us all the wisdom today. I'm just here to kind of host the conversation. But Chad's been doing this a long time, and Chad has also planned a lot of Christmases in his day. And so he has a lot of exciting things to share, and I'm grateful for him. Before we dive into the conversation, just a few kind of housekeeping things. First, at the very end of our conversation today, we are actually going to be giving away a copy of Dale's new book called Stalled: Hope and Help for Pastors Who Thought They'd Be There by Now. My copy is currently packed away in a box next to me. I don't know if you have a copy with you, Chad.
Hang on.
Oh, go get it. Go get it. But we are going to give away a copy of Stalled at the very end. So if you hang on with us till the end of this conversation, there will be a chance that you can get it, because you have to be here with us to claim it and let us know where to send it. So that's what we're going to be doing at the end. Also, we would love for you guys to be as much a part of this conversation today as Chad and I are. So please be sure to be sending your thoughts, your questions in the chat. Feel free to interact with one another in the chat. Joe already put this there, but when you're typing a message, there's a little drop-down box, and it'll default to be sending just to the panelists, which only shows it to Chad and myself. So if you're sending something and you don't want everybody else to see it, you can do that. But if you do want everybody else to see it, and just to kind of be facilitating community and kind of the conversation, just change that to panelists and attendees. It's a little drop-down box that you can change, and that way everybody can see your responses and your comments. And then the last thing that I wanted to highlight today before we jump into this conversation is that we don't want to spend a ton of time today kind of talking about like how to do church during COVID-19, because by this point, I think everybody here kind of has the vein that they're running in. Everybody's in a different context. Some of you have decided not to meet through the end of this year. I know that's true for some of the churches who signed up. Some of you have been meeting since like May of this year. Some of you are in contexts that have higher restrictions. Some of you are not. And so if you feel like we're not addressing something that would pertain towards your particular context, just let us know in the chat, and we'll kind of circle back around to include that or to address your context specifically. But we're really going to try to talk about everything from the lens of both in-person church, online options, in-person options, all sorts of things surrounding the topic of Christmas. So anything on that, Chad, you want to highlight before we kind of dive in?
Yeah, I think in addition to COVID-19, the other thing that we know is true is that every church has its own fingerprint and its own DNA. And so what I've learned in terms of working with churches is that we can kind of glean from the things that we share, but all of the things that we put out there today, that the best part about it is taking those things to your team, to your leadership, and then just determining, okay, let's look through the lens of our church, our uniqueness, and how can this apply, or does this apply to us?
Exactly. That's so good. So Chad, let's just go ahead and get things rolling. Unless anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But just to get this conversation started, and I know this is going to seem like an obvious question, and it might seem a little stupid to start out with this way, but I know that you're going to take it to a deeper level than it sounds. Why are we having this conversation today?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because it's October. It's not Halloween yet, right?
Right.
So here's a couple of things. Number one is, and this especially for smaller churches, having worked with many, many small churches, over 100 churches actually in the last several years. One of the hiccups with smaller churches is we plan Christmas in mid-November,
Yeah.
and sometimes we plan it the first week of December,
Yeah.
and it can be a problem. And so just planning early in itself gives the Holy Spirit more permission to tweak and massage the plan.
Absolutely.
When we start having those conversations early, it just gives the Spirit of God that opportunity to wake us up at 2:12 a.m. with a great idea.
Yep.
We take it to our team, we develop it, we massage it. But probably, I would say for the most part of our conversation today, and this is just my perspective, this isn't a fact, it's what I'm assuming, it's what I'm sensing. I feel like that in the country right now with COVID-19, people are longing for something normal.
Yeah.
Now, when I say normal, I know that Christmas is certainly not going to be normal, but it's probably going to be one of the closest things that we can experience that feels like pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think people are sensing that they want something normal. I think just the traditions that families practice, all of those things is just going to be a fresh breath of air as we've went through all the things we've went through with COVID-19. The other thing that I want to say, and this is looking even a little bit further out ahead, the other thing that I'm sensing is that 2021, I could be totally wrong on this. I'm being cautiously optimistic when I say this.
Yeah.
I feel like 2021 is going to be an amazing opportunity for the local church.
Absolutely.
I think that we are going to see just some opportunities to impact people with Jesus. Here's the reason I sense that. It's not anything I've heard on Fox or CNN. The reason I sense that is I kind of think God probably has a plan in all of this. And he's not in heaven with his angels and, in a boardroom trying to figure out what to do with COVID-19.
Yep.
Somehow he's going to use this for the glory of God's kingdom.
Absolutely.
And he's going to use this to help people know his son, Jesus. And so I think that there's opportunity there. And so my thoughts are, if we plan well at Christmas and we push strong into the new year, man, this could be a momentum starter that could help a lot of churches. And when I say help churches with momentum, I don't mean so much everyone gathered in one room, whether that's digital, whether it's in person. I'm just talking about impacting people's lives for Jesus.
So dive a little bit deeper and, take it where it needs to go. But how can Christmas this year be the launch pad into 2021 to make it that year that's powerful for our church, where we're engaging new people and seeing our influence on our community grow? Like what should that look like, and what's your hope for all of the churches who are watching this webinar to kind of make it that launch pad?
And I think that we're going to have to be a bit more creative with our invite strategies.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be a bit more creative with our follow-up. But the thought is, so think about it like this. I feel like, and I know this will be a conversation we'll have later today in the webinar, but I think there's a lot of people who used to come to church, whether it's digital or in person, that just have kind of clocked out. And I sense that people in the country have this kind of almost unspoken permission to clock out of church, and they're not convicted about it. We have something to blame it on.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, the restaurant that you haven't been at for a long time, and then you go and you're like, oh man, I forgot how great this was. So if Christmas can be a platform, digitally or in person, to get people back on campus or back on the digital campus, if we can use that as a platform just to get them to reset their rhythm, to reset just their whole mode, and just hopefully they're going to have that moment where, man, I have missed church. So I'm thinking if we could launch 2021 because we did well at Christmas, digitally or in person I think it's going to be a momentum boost for the church, especially if that includes life change. So that's what I'm excited about.
Dude, that's awesome. I love your fire, man. We're just getting started. This is good. So for all the people watching, and just to kind of hear from you guys, let us know. I'd love to hear in the chat. Just let us know, is this like about the time that you normally start planning for Christmas? Does this feel early to you? Does this feel late to you? Are you feeling hopeful? Kind of give us some of your initial thoughts as we're entering this conversation, just so that we can kind of set the foundation, and then we'll go from there. Thane says it's game time, so I love it.
We usually start in August, but COVID kind of threw that for a loop this year.
Yeah. Well, then it's just felt, the thing about this year is it's just felt so reactionary because things have changed so quickly. And so we want to just try to, do you see that? Rick said, early. It's not December 24th yet, is it? And that's the thing. I think that a lot of churches do wait till the last minute, just like you said. Like even the first week of December is sometimes early for a lot of churches, and it's important for us to get out in front of that. So, Chad, just to get into, I know some of the meat of what you want to talk about today. One of the things that you talk about, and we've talked about this outside of this all the time, but you talk about this for Sundays, for holidays, all the time, about the difference between a weekend service and a weekend experience, like what people just go to and then what people remember. And so how should we be approaching Christmas from that lens? Like, how should we look at it in a different way to be providing an experience rather than just a service?
Yeah, that's good. And I want to just say that this is probably true every Sunday,
Yeah.
but it has a lot more teeth on it when it's this type, a holiday, especially Christmas. I don't know if you guys have checked out Tony and Amy with the Unstuck group did a podcast, and they talk about Christmas a little bit. Actually, I think it just came out this week.
It's good, and it's short. It's a great one.
Short and it's good. And they one thing Amy said on the podcast was that Christmas, unlike Easter, is really more of a tradition, a holiday that every unchurched person has some kind of practice or tradition built around. So especially things like that, and this is true every Sunday, but especially when it's an opportunity to gather people. So when we think about a weekend service, which was usually what we call our church, a church service, the bigger idea is, how do we change our service into experience? Here's the big idea. Services get attended, experiences get remembered and talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone can come to an experience, that means that from the time they get out of their car, or even from the time they log in or they jump on a digital strategy, that they are engaged in such a way that it is not just a service, but they are literally experiencing something.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you an example that may make more sense. So this time of year, actually next month, is one of my wife's most dreaded times because Kentucky Wildcat basketball starts.
Okay.
Huge UK fan. I'm also a huge Office fan. You can see my calendar. There's two things that she hates: The Office, and she hates UK basketball.
That is so sad.
It is sad. She's missing out. But so here's why she hates it. Maybe some of you pastors out there get this, but she can't stand the sound of the squeaky shoes on the court that's echoing through our house.
Interesting.
As well as me screaming, go, 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 trying not to cuss and things like that.
Hilarious.
But here's the deal. If I get UK tickets, which sometimes I do,
mm-hmm.
she'll put on a UK sweatshirt. She'll get a pom-pom. She'll do everything but paint her face blue.
Wow.
And all the way to Lexington, she will be cheering and yelling. We get out of the car. She's high-fiving people in the parking lot. We get in Rupp Arena and she's cheering, sometimes for the wrong team. I got to pull her back. No, not that team, this team.
Wrong blue.
Even when we're leaving, she loves it. And so the idea is, she don't even understand the game, but she gets excited about the experience.
Yeah.
Here's the principle. If I were rich and had plenty of money, we'd go to all the games. Eventually, because she loved the experience and that would get her there, eventually she's going to learn the game. And so when we think about a weekend experience, we keeping in mind that we're going after unchurched people, whether it's on a digital platform or in person, we have to think about, we have to create an experience that's going to keep them coming back, because chances are when people walk into your church for the first time or they engage on your digital campus, they're not there to go, okay, tell me about Jesus and tell me how to be saved. That's not their question. They're just checking it out. But if the experience is good enough, meaning the hospitality is right, if the engagement's right, if the flow of the facility is right, if the flow of the digital engagement's right, that can keep them coming back. And eventually, just like Melissa, my wife, would know the game, eventually God's going to do something with the gospel and people's lives can be radically transformed. And so when we think about the weekend experience, Austin, that's probably a webinar on its own, because there are so many moving parts to create an experience as we think about a seamless, flowing experience where people leave with the attitude of, man, I would do that again.
That's good. So a couple questions come up for me. One, and you highlighted this kind of surface level, but what would you say are some of those key components of an effective experience, particularly thinking of people who don't typically come to our church? If we're trying to really shape this experience, whether it's virtual or in person, if we're trying to shape this experience for people who aren't followers of Christ, what do we absolutely need to include? And then also, and maybe to take some of the pressure off for some of the people watching, does this set up some like unfair expectations for not being able to sustain a bigger experience moving forward? What are some of your thoughts about those two things?
Yeah. So when we think about creating that weekend experience, hey, Brian, it's good to see you too. When we think about creating that experience, so there's a few key things that I think make the experience, and it's almost the things that make it even in the secular world. For example, when we go to Chick-fil-A
Mm-hmm.
and we order our food and they give us that awesome chicken sandwich and we say thank you, everyone that's watching that's ever been Chick-fil-A knows what they're going to say.
Exactly.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're trained to do that. So we know that a weekend experience that's good is one that's consistent. Consistency matters. It matters for two reasons. Number one is consistency means improvement because we're doing the same thing. But it also means that we're laser focused on who we're trying to engage. And so for Chick-fil-A, they're obviously engaging chicken lovers, and they keep that's why their menu is very, very slim and very focused. With the unchurched, as we try to reach unchurched people, we have to think through, what does it look like for us in our hospitality? Now, we know how Baptist Billy and Methodist Martha want to be greeted.
Exactly.
But what about the unchurched person whose dog just died, his wife just left him, someone said the church had hope, he shows up? How do we engage that person? So what does hospitality look like on the front end? I think a second piece that really determines and drives that weekend experience is the right engagement. Yeah. So obviously we don't want to pass around something asking for routing numbers. We don't want to be on a digital platform, sending emails or chat rooms saying turn or burn and things like that. So we have to make sure we look through the lens of the people we're trying to reach, because here's a big part of the weekend experience. Are we using the right language to reach the people that God's called us to reach, whether that is digital or in person? I think another piece of it, to me, this is one of the biggest pieces, is that we have to declunk the weekend experience. The thing that can kill a weekend experience, because remember, everything's about flow. And so if everything's flowing from the time they get out of their car or the time they log in or they jump on the digital platform, if everything's flowing and then the service begins and you've got these dead spots and you've got all this clunkiness that's happening, it will immediately kill a weekend experience. I say it like this. Imagine Sunday morning, imagine your worship center, your sanctuary, whatever you call it, being a swimming pool. And the moment someone sits down and if you have a countdown or the worship guy or gal takes off, worship lady takes off, imagine the flow starts, the pool is full. Yeah. Swimming pool is, everything's flowing. The moment there's a dead spot, the moment there's a downtime, the moment there's a pause, the pool drains, and then you've got to recapture that again. Yeah. So when we think about an experience, we think about, how do we start it from the front door all the way to the worship center, the auditorium, the sanctuary? How do we make sure that worship, preaching from front to back, closing, all of that is seamless, that it makes sense, so that when people, here's the thing, services feel long, experiencers like, I can't believe it was that long. I felt like it was 15 minutes. Exactly. That's huge for an unchurched person. Yeah.
That's good, man. And I'm just reading through the chat here, and I love seeing that a lot of people really have already started the conversation or have been planning to start the conversation around this soon. So good job, guys, for doing that. I want to ask one more question before we move on to a different aspect of this, just to kind of see where people are at. When you are thinking about Christmas this year and your church specifically, are you anticipating, and this is a question to all the people who are watching, are you expecting to put most of your energy towards an in-person experience, a virtual experience, or both? Let us know here in the chat so that we can kind of have that in mind as we're going forward. Lori says both. We'll see some more people come through here. Dane says both, a lot of both. Good stuff. A little more towards online, both digital and in person. Good stuff, guys. I love it. Rick says in person, they have almost everyone back now. Hallelujah. That's cool, man. Both. James says both, but want to engage online. Robert says Sunday. And then Bill says Christmas and Christmas Eve will be focused on in person with everything live streamed too. Okay. So that kind of gives us something to focus on there. But Chad, before we dive into kind of that conversation, one of the things is you're talking about is just greeting people how they want to be greeted and really creating this experience. It makes me think of just the times that we're living in right now too, because part of that this year, especially if we're going to be offering in-person experiences, we have to have the evangelistic lens to really make sure that we are coming at this virus thing the way that our community perceives it as well. We don't want to come off, if it's somebody's first time at our church, we don't want to come off insensitive, come off not clued into what's happening, or come off like we're flying in the face of the guidelines that have been set, or things that are happening in the community. And so that's just another aspect for people to be really intentional is don't lose that kind of outsider focus and that evangelistic lens as we're looking at Christmas too, to really be shaping that with an intention to reach people and kind of meet them where they're at as they approach your service.
Yeah. And I've always told the pastors that I coach, I've always told them public perception may not be true, but it might as well be.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace that as a principle, really. And, the Apostle Paul, we've used this so many times to talk about reaching the lost, but it's just even true in the whole COVID context that the Apostle Paul said, to the Pharisee, I became the Pharisee. To he that's without law, I became as he that's without law, without forsaking the law of Christ. I became all things to all men that some might be saved. And so people who are fearful, there's people in that camp, people who thinks it's a hoax in that camp. There's people in the middle. Doesn't matter where I'm at, but there's people that live in all those camps. And as a church, especially in this pandemic, we have to be sensitive that, we've had people leave our church because people wear a mask. Because we don't have faith, and that's okay. They can leave, but we're not here to reach Republicans or Democrats. We're here to reach people for Jesus.
Exactly.
And we just have to be real about where we are.
Yeah. It's a good lens to look at it through. So, Chad, let's jump into, and it sounds like people are kind of looking forward to kind of the digital strategy piece of this conversation. And so this is kind of my favorite part of just what we do at 95 Network and the conversation too. So I'll have some thoughts here as well. But whether it's related to a traditional, quote unquote service, or if we're doing something different, when you hear the words digital strategy in this conversation on Christmas, what kind of comes to mind for you? And what are some of those initial thoughts?
Well, in March, the first thing that came to mind was, oh crap.
Yes.
So, we had a strong virtual presence, but we knew things would have to change. So let me just say this, and this isn't just things that I've came up with on my own. Carrie Newhoff has had a tremendous voice in the whole digital strategy.
Yes.
Tony Morgan, again, if you haven't checked out their latest podcast, they have a few on digital strategy at the Unstuck Church podcast. There's a lot of great. Tom Rayner has had a big voice in this, but here's a couple of things that I've seen that we've experienced ourselves. Number one, when digital strategy first surfaced, I forget the number, so I won't say the number, but there was a very low percentage as far as churches in the country that had a strong digital presence. That changed super quick. All of a sudden, everyone had a digital presence, whether it was preaching on an iPhone, FaceTime, Facebook Live, whatever that might be. But here's, I think, where a lot of people kind of have missed it, and perhaps are still missing it. One thing we know is true: while we should stream our weekend experience, the preaching, the worship, whatever that might look like, I think the thing we have to realize is we will never, ever, ever create a church experience in someone's living room.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So in addition to doing the weekend experience, what my team and I have done, and we have a great team here at our church that are sharp people that have really helped me get my arms around this, is we have went to more of an episodical perspective, where instead of, because what we've learned very quickly is people aren't going to lean in for an hour on a video, or whether it's live or even on demand. People just don't do that, especially when they got two kids climbing them like a tree, and you got everything going on around you in the home. So what we've learned is if we can create 5 to 7 minute episodes or talks, if you will, that are laser focused on the people we're trying to reach. This means that it's not going to be someone on stage speaking to a crowd. We're going to readjust the lens, and we're going to pretend like every episode is talking to one person,
Yeah.
because in reality, that's who you're talking to when you think about a digital strategy. You're not talking to a group, you're talking to one person. And even if someone creates a Facebook group or a watch party, it's still it's a better practice if you lean into, we're going to talk to one person. A 5 to 7 minute window, meaning that you don't have worship, because as much as we want to believe that when people are at home in their pajamas raising their hands worshiping God, chances are they're trying to get the gravy off their shirt if they're watching it in the morning, and they're trying to get their coffee down. So I think we just need to abandon the fact that we're going to create a church service in the living room. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
This is not that. That's the principle. This will never be that, which is why in person is also important. But when I think about digital strategy, there's a couple of things. I think number one, we have to make sure that we build it, that we language it, and that we brand it in a way that is going to target the people we're trying to reach. Because as you know, Austin, since COVID-19, we went from, a handful of really good online opportunities in terms of churches to a buffet of churches. And every Sunday you can scroll and see hundreds, small, medium, and large churches. So we have to rethink that. If we're going to reach people with the gospel, no lost person wakes up and says, I think I'm going to scroll for churches today and meet Jesus. That's not going to happen. So we have to create language. We have to create branding. We have to create topics. We have to make sure that we readjust our lens more clearly, that we create this content that's going to reach people who are far away from God. The second part of digital strategy that's important, and I think this is still a struggle with lots of churches, is it's a struggle with us, is number one, what is engagement? Number two, how do we measure engagement? And number three, how can we turn engagement into steps toward discipleship? Because if our digital strategy isn't helping people either follow Jesus for the first time or follow Jesus more deeply, then it's just a show, and it's not missional. And so those are some things that we're working on at our church, but I know that a lot of churches in the country are having a conversation around, and there's some churches that are making some progress with that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Austin?
Yeah. And Myron just asked about your episodic approach. So we'll circle back to that in just a second. But one of the things Dan Gray said here in the chat, he said, it seems challenging to have a good in-person and a good online in the same service or experience. Please speak to how you make this good. And just as you're talking, Chad, I completely agree with that sentiment, because, just like you're saying, we're not going to be able to effectively create that church service feel and environment in people's living rooms. And it gets even more complicated, when we're talking about Christmas. People already have more people in their home than they're typically, if they've been going to your church online for a little bit, than they have been. And so it's louder. It's going to get harder to get people rallied around something. If you're streaming live on Facebook and they have 15 people in their home, it's going to be hard to get people around like one computer screen, if that's the only way that they have been streaming your content. And it just gets a little bit more complicated. And so I'd encourage people who are watching, rather than just thinking for Christmas as a live stream opportunity or just a service opportunity, be thinking of it as an opportunity to engage a family specifically, not to make people feel part of a service or something like that. There's a really big opportunity for us to bring families together around a specific message. And so I would encourage, just talking about this digital strategy, my first approach towards this would be to first make it an on-demand experience for people who want to engage. Maybe you're even handing out DVDs, or you're creating a portal on your website or something simple, but where you're really crafting this experience to tell people, hey, we've made this just for you. It's not long. Maybe it's 20, 30 minutes. And on this, we're going to share the Christmas message. We're going to have a couple songs that we sing. We're going to engage all of this stuff. But we want you to be able to decide how that's going to look and how that's going to work for your family, which gives people a lot of autonomy and a lot of freedom to fit it into the schedule of their holidays, to engage people and to really make it this family experience if you're going to do something. So I would agree with some of the things that people are saying in the chat. Is if you're just going to stream what you're doing in person online this Christmas, I don't think you're going to see as good of effectiveness as if you were creating something that is for digital specifically, not just made available digitally. I don't know if that makes sense, Chad, or if that sparks any ideas for you.
And let me just say this. I think it's going to speak to Bill and Myron, and as well as Barb, about ditch music and all that. So I think that it's and both. We should live stream our weekend experience.
Absolutely.
Especially because we have a lot of church people who aren't comfortable coming back. And when you ask about ditch music, so maybe not for the Sunday morning experience, but I'm talking about in addition to Sunday morning, this is something that you would film, that you would create, not on Sunday, but you would even go off campus. Let me give you an example about what we're doing for Christmas, and that might be helpful. So for Christmas, obviously we're having our Christmas Sundays, December 20. We're going to start a brand new series called Christmas, Christ, MESS. You can steal it if you want. Finding Christ in the mess is what we're going to talk about. And kind of the big idea is he that knew no mess became a mess to save us from our mess. That's going to be, and with COVID-19, that's going to be a really great conversation. So we're going to have an in-person experience on December 20th. But one of our pastors is going to create a digital episodic Christmas strategy. Now, what that's going to look like, someone asked, what do you mean by episodic? So it's going to be an episode. It's going to be that 5 to 7. It's not going to be a worship band. It's not going to be inside of a worship center. But we are going to brand that. We are going to title that in a way that is attractive and alluring to those who are unchurched. Here's a big part. We're going to invite our church on Christmas Sunday. Hey, here's your mission. Here's your Christmas challenge today. We want you to invite 2 people who you personally know who has never attended church online or in person to join you on Tuesday at 6 p.m. as we unleash Christmas, the digital version. And we're going to name that. So what happens is your people are still on mission because they're going to invite people to watch with them online. We're going to make sure that the content, we're going to make sure the content of that is very gospel, that it's not going to be about, all this Christianese and church language. It's just going to be the pure gospel that Jesus came and he was born and he died and he got up again so that we can live forever. Our goal is that we want to see 10 baptisms come out of that.
That's awesome.
That is our objective. We're wanting to measure that. So it's doing and both. It's creating, live stream. Let the pastor be on the live Facebook Live, whatever you're using. But at the same time, don't let that be your only digital strategy. People are more likely to sit and watch a 5-minute 7 version than they are to sit and watch a 45-minute worship or a 30-minute, whatever it might be, a 50-minute worship service from front to back. And think about it. Here's what you're really doing. You're taking the introduction of your sermon, you're taking the end of your sermon, and you're cutting it away, and you're finding that piece of meat in the middle. What is it that I want people, and by the way, as you can see, this is the way it needs to look, not like you're talking to a big crowd. What is it? What do you want to say to that person who is far away from God? Tie it to Christmas. And man, I'm telling you, the big win is when your church people call you and say, man, you're not going to believe this. My neighbor watched with me, and now he's asking questions about Jesus. He's asking questions about Christianity. That's a win.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. So when we think about this, we want to be thinking of it as a conversation starter, right? We want it to be starting conversations among friends, among families, among new people to the faith, among people who have been in the faith for a long time. We want it to be just something simple, something short, but it's the key there is that it's created for digital. It's easy to consume. It's easy for people to access, and it's easy for people to share, whether they're together or if they're just sharing it with a friend, just for them to experience it. And I think as people are approaching it, and since you're starting the conversation so early, by starting the conversation today, you have time to put something like that together. You have time to record a few short videos, or to put an experience together that you can market and make available. You have the time to make it really, really great. And so don't just plan and put all of your eggs in the basket where you're saying like, well, we're just going to hope that people come in person and we'll just make it available on Facebook or something like that. How are you crafting the experience so that people who don't join are still feel like they're getting that, like you said, that something normal, right? That
Mhm.
thing that makes it
Especially
feel
with
like
Christmas.
Christmas. It's the tradition, right?
And let me add this, because this kind of organically came up this morning in in a conversation I had with my team. I was actually talking about the webinar that we're going to do today. And
Yeah.
so how do we not only how do we go after people who are far away from God, but how do we get them to stop scrolling?
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kind of organically came out. We have to create digital stop signs.
Yeah.
Every Sunday, Monday, whatever you broadcast, this is what's happening. It's a scroll. It's a scroll. And a 3-second stop counts as a view. So that shouldn't get us too excited. It's a scroll. So we have to think about, again, language. And by the way, how we present this, how we plan this, strategy, rhyme, and timing goes behind this. I mean,
Yep.
it can't just be, let's create an event and throw it out there. There has to be a strategy and how you're going to roll it out. And that takes a little bit more time, a little bit more planning, but it's possible and it's doable. Here's the best part. Get this. If your church is small, you now have as much opportunity to reach an online campus as the
Yep.
churches of mega churches that's been doing it for many years now. You have this opportunity because the digital campus, the online campus is growing every single weekend. So I love the fact that we have this opportunity to reach people far away from God. And here's my thought, Austin, is eventually COVID-19, whether it goes away or not, there's going to be a vaccine. It's going to dissipate. Something's going to happen. What if, just saying, what if that we work really hard on, if we're back to in-person, let's continue to work hard on in-person, impacting people with the gospel. Let's also work equally as hard on our digital campus, because what if, when COVID does kind of dissipate, whatever it does, what if somehow our digital campus becomes an on-ramp to in-person?
Yep.
What if people go to our digital campus before they ever come into our building? So our digital campus can eventually become a brand new front door to our church. It can become an extension of our invite strategy. What if we invite our church 6 months or a year from now? Hey, find 3 people and then invite them to our digital, whatever we call it, we can brand it. And what if we have a next step digitally? Hey, we want you to join us in a Zoom link, meet our pastor face-to-face on Zoom, and maybe we can bloom on Zoom. I don't know, but hopefully eventually that is going to be a path to an in-person and gathering together with God's people as COVID begins to dissipate.
Absolutely. And it gets me excited because as I think about this, we're sharing some of these ideas, and whether you guys follow through with like the episodic idea or creating an experience specifically for digital or not, no matter what, we have this opportunity, because this year looks so different, to really get creative. You guys all know your specific contexts well. You know what you've been doing, what's changed. And as we approach this conversation, I just encourage you to really unleash creativity this year, because you could be the first to do something, totally different from what other churches are doing, but it might be what's going to be most impactful for your community this year. And so I really encourage pastors to be willing to kind of start those creative conversations, let their team dream a little bit, whether it's your team of leaders, whether you do have a staff team, any of those things, but also be willing to take a little bit of risk this year as you're approaching it. So what are some thoughts that you have, Chad, just on creativity and risk this year, just thinking through the strategy?
Yeah, that's good. So here's the deal. Churches that are risk averse are opportunity averse.
Mm-hmm.
If you become averse to risk, then you'll miss opportunities. Here's an example. I'm coaching a few pastors, rural pastors right now. We're doing some monthly coaching, and he was talking about, how do I create engagement? And right now they're just streaming the weekend experience.
Yeah.
That is their digital strategy, which is okay, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I talked about, I said, what if you thought about doing a pre and a post show? Get you a couple of speakers, couple of, team members, or build a speaking team. And let's do a pre-show. Instead of a 5-minute countdown, let's do a 5-minute pre-show that's going to encourage people. Hey, here are the ways you can engage. And then let's do a post show that's going to give people an opportunity to let us know if they've responded to the gospel or to take that next step. Everything needs to point toward a next step. Yep. Now, for him, this felt very foreign. And for his people, it was also very foreign. But we have to be willing to take risk if we're going to find that opportunity of what works. Here's the best part. If it sucks, stop it and do something else.
Yeah, and you got time right now.
Exactly. Yeah, with COVID-19, you have the absolute permission to try whatever you want. And if it don't work, blame it on COVID. It's okay. We have to keep trying. I know with my team and I, we have tried, if you could have seen some of the things we've tried on the front, and then we pulled back. No, that doesn't work. This is how churches get better. As you get together, as Austin said, you dream together. Most importantly, we plan well together. We build some good strategy in it, and then we launch it. And if it blows up in our face, that's okay. We wipe our face off and we keep on going. And we have to keep moving, because the church and the mission of the church has not paused.
Absolutely. Chad, this leads us perfectly, honestly, into, you wanted to make sure we talked about specifically invite strategies and follow-up strategies and having a plan in place. No matter what people are doing for Christmas this year, having a plan in place for both of those things. And Myron asked here in the chat for you to kind of go back and explain that digital stop signs idea, which I know kind of relates to that invite strategy. So go ahead and jump back into that topic and kind of give us some principles about those invite and follow-up strategies.
Yeah, well, like I said, I kind of just made that up this morning, so it's new. but so,
we'll explain it at least.
But here's the idea: is how do we stop people from scrolling? So, for example, if let's say Christmas Sunday is coming up, and let's say that I'm just I'm the weird guy that woke up and thought I'm going to see what's on Facebook or YouTube, and if I'm scrolling and I'm seeing Christ is born, and I'm seeing joy to the world, these are things that's kind of brown I've seen, but what if I did see Christmas spelled with MESS at the end? That's like, what the heck is that? What if the branding, what if the language was something that made me go, okay, what, some companies call it clickbait. What makes people click? And that's what a stop sign is. A digital stop sign is what can make people stop and scroll. I think it was Kerry Newhoff who said that, and I can't remember the exact measurement. It's in one of his articles that he just put out a couple of months ago. I think he said that if people engage 5 minutes in the content, he counts that a win, because that's 5 minutes that he's been able to speak into someone's life, to engage with them. And so when we think about digital stop signs, what are some things that's going to make them stop? So here's a good example. If someone stops on your whatever your digital approach is, and they have to listen to 4 Christmas songs before they get to the message, I'm not sure they're going to stick around, unless they're a musician and they're looking at how talented the musicians are. I'm not saying they won't, but I'm saying probably not. Does that mean we shouldn't have our worship on? No, I'm not saying don't have your worship on. I'm saying we need something in addition to what we do on Sunday to go after our digital audience. So that 5 to 7 minute thing with a good digital stop sign, meaning the language, the branding, how it's presented, even how it's promoted.
I was going to say, because those digital stop signs, it's not just about the day of, right? It's not just about stopping the scroll on Christmas or during your Christmas service. It's about the next 2 months. How are you creating intrigue? How are you getting people interested? How are you getting people to even see what you're doing? Let's talk about
the digital stop sign we used.
We
talked about Christmas in October. Guess what everyone did? They stopped. They looked at it because it's relevant. Our target audience was pastors.
Right.
And so we made sure that we languaged it right. We made sure that the imagery, the brand was right. And we put it out there in front of everyone in enough time so they could see the stop sign and stop. And as a result, we've had a successful webinar. So it's the same thing, except your target isn't pastors, or at least I hope it's not. Your target is unchurched people who are far away from God. So this is where, listen, Pastor, let me just speak to you directly. You are not Moses who needs to go on the mountain, get the vision, come down and tell the people. God has put a team around you. And if you don't have a team around you, get one. because the Bible says there is safety in a multitude of counsel. And when the Holy Spirit begins to, to influence a conversation of a few people around you, some great things can come out of that. And this is how I promise you watch Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle, Stephen Furtick, you watch any of these guys, what you're seeing on Sunday, they didn't get on the Monday before. These were conversations they had long before that with their team, and they all spoke into it, and they allowed the Holy Spirit to massage that conversation. And as a result, some great things come out of it. The same is true with digital strategy. When you ask the right questions, you'll start the right conversation and you'll land on some pretty cool things. Yeah. When you ask your team, okay, how do we create a digital stop sign? They're going to say, what's that? You're going to say, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you what that looks like.
I'm an expert now. I heard these two guys talk about it. Well, and really just as we're thinking about this invite strategy in general, just having the right audience and thinking through, how are we making what we're offering this Christmas interesting, right? How is it applying to people's lives? How is it relating to the emotions that they're experiencing this year and as we approach this season? Like, what's going on for the people we're trying to reach? And how can we leverage that to really get them interested and wanting to engage in what we're providing? And by acknowledging that and by thinking through that lens, we're going to make it easy for our people to invite their friends. We're going to make it easy to engage people if they just randomly see it on a Facebook ad or just on our Facebook feed or anything like that. We're going to make it shareable, which is what's going to create that kind of snowball effect for people tuning into what we're doing. So,
Austin, can I go to like a dangerous side of the camp for a minute?
Oh, yeah, you can. Whatever you want, man.
So let me just preface this by saying that we should never, ever, ever, ever remove our focus from the digital campus, the digital strategy. That is not going away. It should never go away. And if you think whenever in person turns 100%, if you neglect digital campus, you're making a tragic mistake and you're abandoning one of the greatest platforms that the church has ever had. So let me just say that.
Yeah.
At the same time, our hopes are, I think all of us hope that eventually, as I said a moment ago, COVID-19 will dissipate. Yeah. And we have to think about wherever you're at, your context, your restrictions. We know that all has a lot to do with it. But let's talk just for a moment about the value of invite strategy. And let's talk specifically about in-person. Can we do that for a moment?
You want me to throw up that chart you sent me?
Yeah, let's do that. So Austin's going to share a chart with you at our church. We open on May 24, and this is important as you look at this chart, because what I want you to see is, number one, there's a lot of planning and strategy that my team and I did to make this happen. But I want you to notice there were only two really downward trends. One was Labor Day weekend. The other was fall break weekend. Yeah. After that, everything continued to trend up. Now, this is in person, and understand that we have restriction and we have mask restrictions and we're social distancing and we're disinfecting and we are obeying the guidelines of our health department. So we are not the mavericks out there just, name it, claim it, blab it, grab it people. We're not those people. So we're trying to be super careful. But I want to point out just a couple of things as we think about strategy. And before I say that, let me say this, that here's something I have never thought I would say in my life working with churches, that in addition to creating an invite culture that reaches unchurched people with the gospel of Jesus, I believe that COVID-19 is and will continue to push the church in a brand new place that it's never been before. Yep. And that is that the church is going to have to develop a strategy to reach church people to get them back. Now, let me tell you why that is. We said a moment ago that people have this unspoken permission to miss church. They have gotten out of rhythm of going to church. I know every pastor watching that's in person now feels the pain of that because they're not in church, but they're on the beach. They're not in church, but they're at Walmart. And these are arguments, whatever, wherever you land on that. But here's the reality. Here's why this is important. Whenever it makes sense and it's safe for you to begin to really go after an in-person attendance, what we know is true is that your church people are the engine of invite. So what that means is you need a strategy to get your people back. Yeah. There's this guy, if any of you out there are as old as I am, I'm still in my 40s, but I'm barely hanging on to that. And when I was a young preacher, J. Vernon McGee was the commentary set to have. They were expensive. My mom would get me 2 every year, till I got the whole collection. Awesome. I don't remember a lot about what he wrote. He's super old school. But one thing I'll never forget reading that J. Vernon McGee wrote, he wrote, "Shepherds do not make sheep, sheep make sheep." And
Yeah.
you think about that, it's not the pastor's responsibility to make sheep. It's his job or her job to equip the sheep to make sheep. So in other words, we have to get our people back in order for them to be that invite engine, to reach the people they know who are far away from God. So
Yeah.
as you saw on the chart, there was some language around each spike. And so what we did is we created some opportunities. The first thought we had was, what if we create a safe opportunity? We just get people back on campus, because as a result, we think that they're just kind of out of rhythm. So we did this thing called Reset at Sunset. It was an evening service, very safe, cast some vision. It was very
cool.
short. As a result of that, we bumped. Then we did phase 2, we bumped. Then we did phase 3, we bumped. At phase 3, our goal was to have 500 in attendance and 400 to become our new low number. At the time, our new number was 350. That's where we were stuck at. So we did phase 3. We created the right language, the right branding. We did the right marketing for it. We had 537 on that Sunday.
Wow.
And now our lowest number since then is 430. So 400 was our objective. So at Christmas, we have numbers as well that we're planning for. So I think that it's important that whether it's now or later, when it makes sense, when COVID dissipates or whatever restrictions look like, I think it's important to put on the front burner of every pastor. If that is your struggle about getting your church people to come back, you need a strategy to get your people back, because your people are the engine of reaching other people.
That's so good. And, just for people, don't get caught up in those numbers, right? The reality is that's where Chad's church was at.
We were at 800, by the way, before. So that's a big drop for us.
It's different, right? But the key thing is that you put together a plan and you worked the plan and you saw success with it. And so as we're approaching this, that's the first step, right? You got to get your people back. You got to get your people engaged, whatever that looks like.
As well, Austin, that could be getting them back digitally even.
Exactly. That's what you just have to get them consistently engaged in whatever it looks like for you. But you need a plan. You need a plan. And that plan starts with engaging your people and it ends with engaging new people. And so what is the plan that you're going to have in place? What's the goal that you're leading people towards? And how can you put practical steps and goals in place to help you get there? It's strategic planning and it's shortened time span. We teach it all the time. And it's really, really important. Chad, we are closing in on the end of this conversation. So I wanted to, we have a few things we want to tell you guys about before we give away the free copy of Stalled. And we'll do that here in just a few minutes. But if you guys do have any quick questions, feel free to throw them in the chat here in just the next 2 to 3 minutes. We're going to kind of do some rapid fire Q&A if they come in. But Chad, early on in this conversation, Brian Chitwood asked, he said, we've planned our messages. One question I have is, would it be wise to go off campus, perhaps to our high school, so that we can have both of our services meet at the same time? Or would moving the location be tough for those who like having Christmas at their church?
That's a good question. And, I think again, the restrictions are going to play into a lot of that. I don't know I know for example, there's a church I work with in Seattle. They are still limited on how many can even gather. Yeah. I think there's value, especially at Christmas. I think there's value in having it at the church. People, that's kind of a tradition. That's a value. I think it's more appealing. But I would even say that you could do and both. There's nothing saying again, this is a time to experiment. This is a time to try new things. And right now, I think the thing that we need to measure more than attendance is impact. Yep. And I mean, attendance is important. And I mean, numbers aren't the most important thing, but if you ever stop looking at them, you'll think they are. And so we know numbers are important, but I think the thing that COVID-19 has done for us, Brian, and when I say us, I'm talking about the church in general, the Big C church, is it's really caused us to just have the conversation about, instead of attendance, we really need to look at are we making impact? Yeah. And so I think, you could go off site and it could be a win. I know, for example, every Easter, there's churches that move out of the church into the school or into the theater for mainly for space and facility issues. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing. It's just, what are you trying to accomplish, right? It starts with that conversation. And
I will say this, Brian, that Christmas is the one time a year, the only time a year that you can 100% get away with tradition, nostalgia,
Yeah.
classic. Even young people value that. And so that's why that I think the church has a great opportunity for Christmas, because it's kind of
Yeah.
traditionally people go to church on Christmas Sunday. And I will say that how you package that, how you market that can also have a major uh, influence on whether people jump on digitally or they jump on campus.
Yeah.
And by the way, let me just a shout out to Brian, if I may, real quick. So
Yes.
Brian is a client of mine, and man, I was so shocked. Brian and I connected last month, and I talk with lots of pastors every month,
Mm,
and his church is killing it.
that's
Their
awesome.
goal was to baptize 20 people in a year.
Yeah.
I learned last month that they've already baptized, I think it was 12 or 10 or 12 on one
Wow.
Sunday.
Are you
And so,
serious?
yeah, I mean, they're doing stuff in the
Good
community. They're
job, Brian.
in the midst of COVID, and they're doing it
Yeah.
safe, and they're doing it right. And so hats off to you, Brian, and your team.
Yeah. Um, just to kind of close out, I love that. And Brian, you guys are killing it. Myron asked one quick question, and then we'll close this out. Are those pre-show and post-show episodes, kind of the episodic content you had talked about earlier, are those entirely separate from the Sunday worship, like filmed at a completely different site and different people, or what does that look like?
Well, you can obviously pre-record them. The challenge will be is just making sure that it ends at the right time that service starts, because we don't want service starting late. That is a stickler of mine. Service needs to start when you say service starts. The other side of pre-recording it is you can't talk in real time. For example, you can't say, "Man, it's coming a blizzard out there." It just feels more authentic. So
Yes.
my preference is that the pre and post be live
Yeah.
on site. For us, what we like, and I know that some of us have limitations with cameras and
Yep.
switchers and things like that. So we do what we have to do. But here's the thing that I've learned, and I want to just say this was it Byron that asked the question?
Yeah, Myron did.
Myron. All right. So here's what through COVID, I've learned this, that people aren't really, and this is a shift, but people aren't all about the professionalism. They're not all about the lights and the bells and the whistles. People now are just about authenticity. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you have one camera in your church and you have to span it, who cares?
Yeah.
A pre-show is awesome if you can do it live. I personally love to see pre-shows with like people in the background before church starts.
Yeah.
If you're in person, just some things happening. Those can be, if you're not in person, those can be done off campus at some pretty cool places. You could find a
Mm-hmm.
nice lake or an old church building. There's just lots and lots of things. You could do the pre and post show in a place that would go along with the sermon series idea of the brand. So
Yeah.
my preference is live, but it certainly isn't the right thing. It's just a way.
Yeah. That's good stuff. All right. To kind of, since we've kind of passed the time here that we said we'd be done. We just have two things that we want to tell you guys about. And first off, just thank you guys for hanging out. I hope that this was really what we hoped happened with this conversation, is just that it was a conversation starter. I hope that there were either just some new ideas or new ways of thinking about Christmas this year that you can take back and talk to your team about. We're actually going to send you guys the recording of this. So if you even want to watch back through this with your team, feel free to do it. We'll try to send that out later today, tomorrow at the latest. But two things that we wanted to tell you about that you may have heard us talking about via email and things like that. But the first one is that we're doing something called the Stalled National Conference on November 17th of this year. And we just did our first Stalled conference a couple weeks ago, and it was incredible. And it's all about your heart as a leader, your heart as a pastor. We have conversations like this all the time where we're like, how are we going to make Christmas great? How are we going to grow our church? How are we going to get healthy? All of these things. And we don't often take a step back to check in with ourselves and see how we're doing and see how our leadership is and if we're healthy as leaders, because the reality is if the leader isn't healthy, they can't grow a healthy church. It rises and falls on leadership, as the old adage goes. And so we would love to personally invite you to come to the Stalled National Conference. It's going to be one of our bigger events. It's going to be great. And if finances, we just always like to say this, if finances are the only thing that's keeping you from coming, please let us know, because we never want that to be the only barrier from you attending anything we do, but attending this conference. And so you can find all the details for that on our website. I'll include the link to it as well in the follow-up email to this. And then Chad also wanted to tell you about one other opportunity for you to hang out more with him through a new thing that we're offering. So Chad, what did you want to highlight? What'd you say?
So we always have fun.
Yeah, we do.
Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, you do it.
All right. So we just recently rolled out monthly coaching. So what that looks like is you and I come together once a month on a 1-hour call. The first thing we'll do is just to get a good 30,000 foot view of your church.
Yep.
And then I'm going to develop a coaching plan that's unique to your church. We're going to actually do that together. And we're going to deal with best practices. We're going to discover low-hanging fruit. I'm going to help you with your planning. I'm going to help you with your strategy. For those of you that need help with digital strategy, this is a very low investment that will bring a great return. And I only say that is because I've been coaching for many years, and we've never had anyone quit yet. So they've always lasted, and we've always seen great fruit. So if you would love to jump into a coaching relationship, we would love for you to do that. And we are going to offer that to you. The first month is free. So here's what that means.
Hold up. I want people to hear that. Literally, you can get started with coaching $0, completely
we'll
free.
have our
You don't
first
even have
session.
to sign anything. You just,
if you want to do a coaching call with me about digital strategy, just book it.
Yeah.
Austin to give you the information and be free. If you don't like it, you have to come back. We have a no return policy. You don't have to return.
Yeah.
99% of the people do because it's helpful. So most importantly, we just want to be helpful to your church and your team so we can help you reach people for Jesus. That is the win for 95 Network.
Yeah.
Is reaching people with the gospel of Jesus by far more than anything else. So if you want to give that a whirl, let Austin know, let us know, we'll make it happen.
Yeah. So right in the chat, there's the link to both of those things. One, we'd love to see you at the National Stalled Conference. It's going to be a great day, and I really think it will be a game changer for a lot of you guys, just in the way you view this year and yourself and all of those things. You can find the link there. And also you can start coaching and schedule a free coaching call with Chad using the link in the chat as well. It's 95network.org/coaching. And you can you can follow the coaching plan we typically follow, or if you just want to dive deeper into what we talked about today, you can do that as well. And to do it tomorrow, you could literally start for free. Well, not tomorrow, but you could get something scheduled tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And so really encourage you. That's as good as it gets, guys. So seriously, Chad has a lot of experience, and we would love to see a lot of people taking advantage of this new resource that we have. Which brings us, do you have anything else to add, Chad?
I do not.
Okay. So this brings us to our last thing. Do you have a copy of the book Stalled with you?
It's at home. Sorry.
So we are the worst team members ever. It's a good thing Dale's not on this webinar.
But it's on my bedstand, okay?
You're reading it.
I've already read it.
But we did, Dale recently came out with a book called Stalled, and the subtitle's Hope and Help for Pastors Who Thought They'd Be There by Now. And we want to give one of you guys a free copy for being here today. And so some of the people have hopped off here. Even if you've read it, you can still accept the free copy and give it to a friend so you can talk about it, or you can pass it on to somebody else. But I am going to do a little random drawing here. And if you're in here, if I say your name and you're in here, just let me know real quick in chat. If I don't hear from you, then I'm going to pick somebody else. So the first name that we have here is George Johnson. George Johnson. I haven't seen him come in chat so far, but George, if you're here, let me know, and we'll get you this book. We'll give it like 10 seconds. Okay, we're picking another name.
Drum roll.
Let's see. Lenny Miller. Is Lenny here? I don't think he's here either. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to pick a name from the participants here since people are closing out. All right.
Myron wants one.
You know what, Myron? We're going to send it to you. How about that?
Way to go, Myron. Way to be proactive.
All right. Myron. Oh, hilarious. Raymond, did I? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Raymond, but you can always go get a copy at 95network.org/stalled. So Myron, hey, I'll shoot you an email here right after this and get your mailing address. And then we will get you that book here soon. Raymond has one that's signed. So that's way better. There you go. And actually, I think Myron, you'll get a copy that's signed too. So anyways, guys, I know that this went a little bit over, but thank you for hanging out with us. We hope that this conversation was helpful. And we'd love to see you again, take advantage of both those things. One, join us at the Stalled National Conference, and two, get plugged in with leadership coaching through chat.
Hey, Austin.
Yep.
For those that stuck around, we should let them know that in December, we're getting ready to come together and plan some of these for the new year. That's going to be awesome. Some webinars.
Yeah. We are, especially if you guys have been following us for a little bit, webinars have not been a thing that we have done a lot of, but we, especially with the addition of Chad to our team, we are going to make this a consistent thing that we offer. And so coming in the new year, we have a lot of really cool ideas already planned for that, and some new ones that we're going to be doing. So please be on the lookout for that for future webinars. They're going to be on some kind of hot topics, things that everybody's thinking about, and we hope that they're really helpful for you guys in your context. So thank you for joining us for this one, and we hope that we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.
See ya.